let's take a moment to appreciate modern comforts like Tylenol, indoor heating, and not getting dumped into a swamp after death. Because today's tale, it's a certified Iron Age horror show. Enter Mora, or, as she's sometimes called, the girl of Uchter Moor, a young woman whose life was basically the ancient version of a non-stop bad day. So, who was she? Mora was a bog body. Yep, you heard right. A bog body, which is basically a human preserved in a peat bog, a kind of super soggy plant matter swamp that's great for naturally mummifying people and not so great for, living. Think of it as history's least relaxing spa treatment. Her remains were discovered in Germany back in the year 2000, and at first people thought she might be a recent missing person, maybe a partygoer who vanished after a night out. But nope, turns out she was over 1,000 years old, hailing from the Iron Age, and was somewhere between 17 and 19 when she died. So, basically still a teen, except her life? Way more brutal than your average high school drama. First off, her skeleton read like a laundry list of pain. Mora's body showed signs of intense physical labor, probably hauling heavy stuff like water jugs through marshy terrain. Basically, CrossFit, but involuntary and way less Instagrammable. But wait, it gets worse. Her skull had 2 massive fractures that had healed, which means she survived a major head injury. Not just a bump, these were serious bone-cracking impacts, likely caused by blunt force trauma. Could have been an attack from outsiders, could have been someone from her own village. Either way, the girl took a hit and lived to tell the tale, though probably with constant headaches and possible neurological symptoms. And as if that weren't enough, Mora also had a benign tumor chilling at the base of her skull. This unwelcome passenger probably messed with her nerves, gave her even more headaches, and caused her spine to curve. Hello, chronic back pain. Her legs? Inflamed to the point that it actually changed the shape of her bones. And all this while still a teenager. Oh, and did we mention she was also malnourished? Her bones showed signs of childhood starvation and illness, likely from cold winters and not enough to eat. Basically, Mora's body was constantly fighting itself and the environment. Every single day must have felt like level 100 in survival mode. Now, as for how she died, there's no evidence she was murdered, which is weirdly the good news here. Most bog bodies show signs of violence or ritual killing, but in Mora's case, it's believed she may have died in a freak accident. That said, there's one odd detail that raises eyebrows. She was found completely naked, with no personal items, no jewelry, nothing, which suggests someone moved or altered her body before dumping her into the bog. Why? We don't know. Maybe it was shame. Maybe it was secrecy, or maybe it was just how her community handled death. Either way, it's suspicious. And just when you think her saga couldn't get more depressing, her discovery was a mess. Literally. She wasn't gently unearthed by archaeologists, but accidentally scooped up and shredded by a machine. Her remains had to be pieced together like a 1,000-year-old jigsaw puzzle. Even in death, Mora couldn't catch a break. So, yeah, next time you complain about a tough day, just remember Mora. Iron Age teenager, survivor of blunt trauma, tumors, malnutrition, and finally, a brutal post-mortem recovery. Life back then, no Wi-Fi, no snacks, just pain. On a regular Monday, May 25, 2020, George Floyd, a 46-year-old black man, strolled into a Minneapolis corner store just trying to buy some smokes. Nothing wild, but a store clerk suspected he handed over a fake $20 bill and decided to call the cops. What started off as a low-stakes, meh kind of situation suddenly took a tragic turn, spiraling into a global call for justice and a tidal wave of protests that literally changed the world. At 8:01 p.m., officers Thomas Lane and J. Alexander Queng showed up to investigate. They found Floyd chilling in a car with 2 other folks. He did what they asked, hands up, no fuss, and was cuffed without any drama. But when they tried to pop him into the back of their squad car, Floyd hesitated. He said he was claustrophobic and started panicking. Things got tense. That's when backup arrived. Officers Derek Chauvin and Tu Thao. The situation escalated fast. Floyd was brought to the ground, still in handcuffs, lying face down. At 8:19 p.m., Chauvin made a decision that would haunt the world. He knelt on Floyd's neck, not for a second, not even for a minute, but for over 9 agonizing minutes. During that time, Floyd pleaded for his life, gasping, "I can't breathe," again and again, more than 20 times. The whole thing was caught on camera by horrified bystanders who begged the officers to ease up, but nothing changed. As minutes dragged on, Floyd's voice faded, his body stilled. By 8:27 p.m., he had stopped moving altogether. Chauvin finally lifted his knee, but the damage was already done. Quang checked for a pulse. None. Still, they didn't jump to help him. At 8:29 p.m., an ambulance rolled in and rushed Floyd to the hospital. It was too late. He was declared dead about an hour later. The video of Floyd's final moments hit the internet like a lightning bolt. It went viral almost instantly, igniting fury across Minneapolis. People flooded the streets the very next day, gathering outside the police station, chanting for justice. Floyd's heartbreaking words, "I can't breathe," became a rallying cry. The movement exploded beyond the U.S. Protests popped up in London, Paris, Sydney, Berlin, you name it. The world was watching, but not everything was peaceful. Some protests turned chaotic. Buildings were burned, curfews were set, and emotions ran high. Still, the core message rang out loud and clear. Enough is enough. George Floyd's death laid bare a system riddled with racial bias and unchecked power. Something had to change. Authorities moved quickly. On May 29th, Chauvin was arrested and hit with serious charges. Soon after, Lane, Quang, and Thao were also charged for playing their parts. Chauvin's high-profile trial kicked off in March 2021 and was broadcast live. On April 20th, he was found guilty on all counts and later sentenced to 22.5 years in prison. The others received sentences ranging from 3 to 3.5 years. Floyd's name became bigger than one person. It became a symbol, a signal flare in the sky shouting for justice, reform, and equality. The protests that followed were among the biggest in history, pulling together millions of voices demanding change. But even with verdicts and jail time, big questions remain. Has real change actually taken root? Are the systems being fixed? Conversations about policing, accountability, and racial equity are still buzzing. One thing's for sure. George Floyd's legacy sparked a movement that refuses to fade, pushing the world toward a future that's more just, inclusive, and, hopefully, better for everyone. She was only 20 years old, full of hope, full of promise, far from home, but eager to discover the world. Ayano Tokumasu had left Japan to study English in Toronto. Bright and curious, she had made the long journey from Toyohashi in Aichi Prefecture to explore life beyond what she knew. For a young woman like her, every day in Canada was a new adventure, new words, new friendships, new places. And on that August day in 2011, she and a friend chose to visit one of the most awe-inspiring natural wonders on Earth, Niagara Falls. What happened next would become one of the most haunting tragedies ever witnessed at the falls. The two girls stood on the Canadian side, umbrellas in hand, as the sky above churned with gray clouds and the thunder of water roared below. They wandered the observation area, just like countless tourists do each day. They laughed, snapped photos, and soaked in the mist that clung to everything. It should have been a perfect memory. Surveillance footage later revealed Ayano standing near the edge, holding her umbrella, straddling the safety railing as many do when trying to capture a better view or pose for a picture. Perhaps she was trying to be playful or brave. Maybe she didn't realize how close she was to danger. She looked out across the churning falls, a curtain of white water cascading over the edge of the world, and then turned, as if to climb back over the railing. In an instant, she slipped. The umbrella tumbled from her grasp. Her feet lost purchase, and she was gone. Just like that, she was swept away by the unforgiving current. Onlookers screamed, powerless. The water swallowed her, pulled her toward the precipice and hurled her over the edge. One second, she was smiling. The next, she had vanished into one of nature's most merciless forces. Emergency crews from both Canada and the United States sprang into action. Helicopters searched the river. Fire departments scanned the rocks. Divers waited, hoping for a miracle that never came. As the hours turned into a sleepless night and then into a day filled with grim silence, the search narrowed. There was no sign of Ayano, just the sound of the falls, louder than ever, and the weight of what had just happened. At her school, the Hansa Language Center in Toronto, no one could believe it. Classmates sat in stunned silence. Teachers wept behind closed doors. Elizabeth Grieve, the director of the campus, remembered Ayano as a cheerful girl, bright, bubbly, fluent beyond her years. She was taking 2 classes and had been just days away from completing her month-long course. "It's a shock for everybody here," Greve said quietly. "She was part of our family. For days, there was no closure, just the image of a girl with an umbrella at the edge of the world, and the ache of not knowing." Then, on the morning of Thursday, August 18th, a staff member at Cave of the Winds, an attraction on the U.S. side of the falls, spotted something in the water. Authorities were called. A body was retrieved from the river. By Friday, it was confirmed. It was Ayano. She had been found. But there would be no miracle, no second chance, only mourning, only memories. One photograph, taken by tourists moments before her fall, shows Ayano standing near the railing, unaware of the fate that waited just a step away. In it, she looks ordinary, perhaps a little curious, maybe even happy, but that still image has since become something else. A reminder, a ghost. She came to Canada to learn, to grow, to live, and in the end, she taught the world something none of us can afford to forget. How fleeting life can be, how close joy and tragedy often stand, separated by nothing more than a moment or a misstep, and how sometimes, even in the safest places, the world can take someone too soon. All right, buckle up, because we're diving into history's first confirmed shark attack. Not exactly the firsts you'd want your name attached to, but here we are, 3,400 years later, still talking about one unlucky dude named Sukumo 24. Sounds like a futuristic robot, right? Nope, just the name archaeologists gave to an ancient hunter-gatherer from Japan who had a very, very bad day. So, what happened? Back in 2021, researchers uncovered a human skeleton near the Sato Inland Sea in Japan. And let's just say it wasn't in the best shape. This guy was absolutely shredded. Like, not gym gains shredded, but chewed up like leftover jerky shredded. We're talking 790 injuries all over his body. Arms, chest, abdomen, hands, basically a full-body horror show. At first, scientists were baffled. The cuts went so deep they gouged into bone, more like what you'd expect from metal weapons than anything natural. But here's the plot twist. Sukumo 24 lived in the Jomon era, a time when metal weapons didn't even exist in Japan. So, unless someone invented time travel to bring a samurai sword back in time just to go full Mortal Kombat on this guy, something didn't add up. Then came the aha moment. Upon closer inspection, the wounds were V-shaped, eerily similar to injuries caused by modern-day shark bites. Combine that with the fact that Japan is literally an island chain, and the conclusion was pretty clear. This man got tag-teamed by a very hungry tiger shark or great white. And it wasn't a quick snack either. It was a full-course tragedy. How bad was it? Every rib, cracked or torn, chest and guts, eviscerated. Dismembered feet and a missing hand? Yep, gone. What's worse, these weren't post-mortem injuries. He was alive when it happened, and he likely fought back, losing limbs in the process. That alone ruled out scavenging. It was a full-blown ambush, not some shark snacking on leftovers. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Sukumo 24 wasn't found floating at sea or washed up somewhere. He was actually discovered in a legit burial site. That means someone had the decency and bravery to recover his mutilated body and give him a proper send-off. So, what's the theory? Researchers believe Sukumo 24 wasn't solo. He was probably out on a fishing trip with others. Jomon people were pro-level fishers after all. The theory goes that he might have jumped in the water to haul in a catch or do some spearfishing, not realizing that blood in the water was ringing the dinner bell for a nearby shark. Next thing you know, chomp chomp, full aquatic horror show. His buddies likely saw it happen and pulled him out, but by then it was game over. Now, before you cancel your Japan trip and vow to never touch saltwater again, relax. Yes, sharks still exist in Japanese waters, but back in the Jomon era, they were way more common. Fossil records show a ton of shark teeth from that time, and even ancient artwork features them, especially tiger sharks and hammerheads. So yeah, shark attacks were basically the medieval version of texting while walking into traffic. In the end, Sukumo 24 didn't survive, but he did make history as the unfortunate owner of the world's first confirmed shark attack. Not the legacy anyone dreams of, but hey, at least he didn't get taken out by something boring like food poisoning. December 2nd, 2020 started out like just another chaotic livestream for Staz Replay, real name Stanislav Reshetnikov, the Russian YouTuber known for broadcasting borderline reality TV chaos from the comfort or discomfort of his home. His streams weren't exactly wholesome content. Think less Mr. Beast, more, what if Jackass had no off switch and zero moral compass? The guy had built a small following by leaning into shock value, verbal abuse, weird dares, and general train wreck energy. But that day, things took a turn from twisted entertainment to something much darker. Something that left viewers horrified and the internet asking how it ever got this far. It all went down live, in real time, in front of an audience. Staz was streaming from his house near Moscow, where he lived with his girlfriend Valentina Grigorieva. Now, live with might be a bit generous. Their relationship was rocky at best, and the streams often showed him verbally berating her for views. But this time, the cruelty escalated. During the stream, one of his viewers allegedly dared him, via a donation, to douse Valentina with cold water and force her outside in just her underwear. And he did it. No hesitation, no second thoughts. He locked her out onto the balcony in the freezing Russian winter like it was part of some twisted game show. At first, he laughed it off, like it was just another outrageous challenge. But as time ticked by, the vibe shifted. Eventually, when he brought her back inside, she wasn't moving. Her skin was pale, lifeless. The stream kept rolling, and the viewers watched in disbelief as Staz went from smug to panicked, poking at her, calling her name, then crying and begging for her to wake up. Paramedics were called, but it was too late. Valentina had died of hypothermia, right there on camera in front of hundreds of viewers. The aftermath was as ugly as the incident itself. Clips of the stream went viral, sparking outrage from every corner of the internet. People couldn't believe it. How did a prank stream turn into an actual death? How had platforms like YouTube allowed this kind of content to fester unchecked? Was this the final form of toxic internet culture? Suddenly, everyone was pointing fingers. At Staz, at the viewers who egged him on with donations, at the platforms that hosted it all like it was just another variety show. Authorities arrested Staz on the spot. He tried to claim it was an accident, that he didn't mean for her to die, that it was all just part of the stream, but no one was buying it. Russian investigators charged him with causing death by negligence, and the story snowballed into an international scandal. News outlets across the globe were suddenly reporting on this obscure Russian streamer, whose thirst for views had led to something truly horrific. And viewers, especially younger ones, were left shaken by the brutal reminder that not all content is harmless entertainment. YouTube eventually deleted his channel, but the damage was done. The incident became a cautionary tale for the entire streaming world, a grim wake-up call about what happens when attention becomes the only currency and empathy gets left behind. It also reignited conversations about the dark side of live streaming, the lack of oversight, the pressure to go bigger, wilder, and more extreme for tips and clicks, and the dangerous blurring of real life and internet performance. Valentina's death wasn't just a tragic accident. It was the result of an environment where cruelty had become normalized, encouraged, even monetized. And while Staz sits behind bars awaiting whatever version of justice comes next, the world is left to wrestle with a bigger question. How far are we willing to let people go for a like, a view, or a donation? Because in a world where everyone's streaming, sometimes the real horror is what we're willing to watch. It started like so many other adventures for Kurt Blair, under the stars, surrounded by snow, driven by a deep love for the mountains. But this time, he wouldn't come back. Kurt was 56 years old, a seasoned mountaineer from Colorado, and one of the few Americans certified by the International Federation of Mountain Guides. In early December 2024, he set off to climb Aoraki Mount Cook, the tallest and most unforgiving peak in New Zealand. He wasn't alone. He was joined by fellow American Carlos Romero and a Canadian climber whose name was never released. The three men had been spotted in good spirits at the plateau hut, 2,200 meters up, the night before they began their summit attempt. Clear skies stretched above them. The route was dangerous, but they had experience on their side. They left at 11 p.m., making their way up the treacherous Zurbriggen Ridge. Along the way, a pair of skiers who'd spent the night with them crossed paths with the climbers multiple times. Conditions were perfect, calm, crisp, and bright. Around 9:30 a.m., the skiers last saw the group 3/4 of the way to the summit. Then, silence. The climbers never made it to their scheduled helicopter pickup later that day. At first, Kurt's sister Katrina didn't panic. Things happen in the mountains, she told herself. Her brother was careful, experienced, a trained avalanche educator. But what began as quiet confidence slowly gave way to dread. There was no emergency beacon signal, an unusual oversight for someone like Kurt. No messages, no signs of life. Days passed. Then came the bitter clues. Romero's jacket was found thousands of meters below where they had last been seen. An ice axe, abandoned. Footprints in the snow, ending abruptly. Search teams believed one of them may have been struck by a falling rock, causing a deadly chain reaction that sent all three plummeting. The unforgiving landscape offered few answers. Only silence. Katrina clung to hope. Even as the winds picked up and the crevasses yawned wider beneath the ice, she couldn't shake the idea that maybe, somehow, they were still alive, trapped, waiting. But then came the dream. One morning, she awoke with her brother's favorite song, Pinball Wizard by The Who, blaring in her head, as if someone had turned it on inside her mind. That's when she knew. He's in a different dimension, she whispered. Soon after, Katrina shared the last photo Kurt ever took, a haunting shot of the mountains under a star-filled sky, with a thin strip of light stretching across the icy ridgeline. It's a quiet image, but in that silence, there's a chilling finality. To those who've seen it, the photo is more than just beautiful. It's terrifying, because it feels like a goodbye. Kurt Blair had lived a life most could only dream of. He was known in the climbing world not for arrogance or ego, but for kindness, precision, and love for the peaks. He died doing what he loved, somewhere high above the clouds, swallowed by the very mountains that gave his life meaning. And now, all that remains is a photo, a song, and a memory frozen in snow. Picture this. It's 31,000 years ago. There are no hospitals, no Tylenol, no doctors, just sticks, stones, and a whole lot of survival instincts. You stub your toe and it's game over. But against all odds, someone in ancient Borneo pulled off a medical miracle that's still leaving scientists shook. The oldest known human amputation. Yep, before there were Netflix doctors, there were cave surgeons with sharp rocks. Until recently, the record for earliest known amputee went to a Neolithic farmer from Europe who had a leg chopped off about 7,000 years ago. Impressive, but not ancient enough. Enter 2020. While most of us were discovering banana bread and emotional breakdowns, a team of scientists stumbled across something way cooler, buried in the depths of a cave in Indonesia called Liang Tebo. Inside that cave, A skeleton, but not just any skeleton. This one was missing a left foot and part of its leg. Naturally, people assumed it had been lost in a tragic, "oops, I fell off a cliff" kind of accident. But then the scientists took a closer look and noticed something weird. The bone showed signs of careful cutting and, wait for it, healing. Yeah, not only had this person survived having a leg removed, but the stump had actually healed nicely. We're talking clean cuts, no signs of infection, and evidence of continued growth afterward. Let's be clear here. Whoever performed this Stone Age surgery was basically a prehistoric rock star. No scalpels, no anesthesia, just sharpened rocks and sheer determination. Somehow, they managed to slice through skin, veins, nerves, arteries, without killing the patient or causing a nasty infection. In fact, modern studies say that even today, about 40% of major amputations can get infected. So, yeah, score 1 for caveman medicine. The person who got the chop, they were likely a child at the time, based on the size of the remaining leg, but grew up into a young adult and lived for years after the operation, possibly even a decade. They eventually died in their 20s from something totally unrelated. Aliens? Saber-toothed tigers? Who knows? But their leg clearly wasn't the thing that took them out. So, what happened to the leg in the first place? Well, the cave sits in a ridiculously rugged area. Picture boulders, cliffs, and all the ankle-breaking terrain you can imagine. Maybe our ancient friend tripped, fell, and their leg got absolutely wrecked by a boulder. Or maybe a rock slide caught them at the wrong time. Whatever it was, it must have been bad enough for someone to say, "Yup, that leg's gotta go." And here's the wildest part. They didn't just survive, they thrived. Okay, maybe not in the modern influencer lifestyle kind of way, but they lived. In a world where literally everything wanted to eat or maim you, they made it. They even probably had a squad who helped them out, carried them around, shared food, and kept them alive. It's one of the earliest examples of human empathy and teamwork. Because, let's face it, hopping through mountains on one leg isn't exactly a solo sport. So next time you complain about slow Wi-Fi or losing a snap streak, just remember, 31,000 years ago, someone had their leg hacked off with a rock, didn't die, and still managed to be part of a prehistoric friend group. Now, that's hardcore. June 26, 2017, was supposed to be the day Pedro Ruiz pulled off the ultimate viral stunt, the kind of over-the-top, jaw-dropping moment that would catapult him and his girlfriend, Mona Lisa Perez, from small-town Minnesota vloggers to internet royalty. The plan? A wild YouTube video involving a stunt so risky, it sounds like it came from the pages of a rejected Jackass script. Pedro would hold a thick hardcover encyclopedia to his chest, and Mona Lisa would shoot him with a .50 caliber Desert Eagle pistol. Yup, you read that right. A literal gun, a literal book, and the hopes that one would stop the other before things got messy. Spoiler alert, it did not end well. Pedro had pitched the idea as a surefire way to go viral. He'd even done a test run with a different book, and apparently that one stopped the bullet. So, naturally, his logic was, why not go bigger and do it for the fans? Except, here's the thing. Books aren't bulletproof vests, and science doesn't care about your subscriber count. Mona Lisa, just 19 at the time and pregnant with their second child, was nervous, real nervous. According to later reports, she even tweeted earlier that day, "Me and Pedro are probably going to shoot one of the most dangerous videos ever." Yeah, no kidding. So there they were, outside their home in Hallstatt, Minnesota. Cameras rolling, family watching, Pedro clutching a hardcover book to his chest like it was a Captain America shield. Mona Lisa standing just feet away, holding a gun she'd never fired before. She pulled the trigger. The bullet ripped through the book like it was tissue paper. Pedro collapsed. Chaos erupted. Mona Lisa called 911, screaming, "We were doing a YouTube video and it went wrong." Paramedics arrived, but it was too late. Pedro Ruiz III, just 22 years old, died from a single gunshot wound to the chest, in front of his girlfriend, their 3-year-old daughter, and an audience that would never see the viral fame he dreamed of. The story made headlines instantly. not because it was just tragic, though it absolutely was, but because it raised a whole stack of uncomfortable questions, like, how did we get here? How did we reach a point where young parents were literally risking their lives for likes and subscribers? What kind of internet pressure makes you believe a gun and a book equals views and success? Mona Lisa was arrested and later pleaded guilty to second-degree manslaughter. She was sentenced to 180 days in jail and 10 years of probation. In court, she was devastated. She didn't try to excuse it or play it off. It wasn't just an oops moment. It was the result of a world where content is king, and the line between entertainment and recklessness has all but vanished. The couple had been building a modest following on YouTube, sharing pranks and family life with big dreams of going viral. But Pedro wanted to go bigger, faster. His aunt later revealed he'd been obsessed with making it big online and thought this was the key. He believed in the stunt. He believed the book would save him. He was wrong. In the aftermath, their video never got posted, thankfully, but the incident became a haunting symbol of internet desperation. This wasn't a dare gone wrong. It was a dream gone deadly. A reminder that going viral can come with very real, very permanent consequences. Now, years later, the story still echoes across the web like a ghost of what not to do. Mona Lisa has tried to move forward, raising their children with a heavy heart and a story she'll carry forever. And the internet? Well, it keeps scrolling, keeps clicking, but somewhere in that endless feed of stunts and pranks, the tale of Mona Lisa and Pedro stands out, raw, tragic, and painfully real. On the night of December 29, 2024, South Korea was shaken to its core. A Boeing 737-800 operated by Jeju Air, carrying 181 souls from Bangkok to Muan International Airport, collided with a wall during landing, and within seconds the aircraft was engulfed in flames. The fire raged mercilessly through the cabin. Of all those on board, only 2 crew members survived. The rest, 179 people, were lost in one of the deadliest aviation disasters in South Korea's history. Among the victims was a 3-year-old boy, the youngest passenger on the flight. Hours before the crash, his parents had taken a photo of him gazing quietly out of the airplane window, the soft glow of the night sky casting gentle shadows across his small face. It was his very first trip abroad, his first plane ride, his first passport, still unstamped. That photo, posted to Instagram with a bittersweet caption, would soon become one of the most chilling final images ever shared. After the crash, it spread rapidly across the internet, breaking hearts and stirring a mix of sorrow and horror. Many who saw it called it haunting, because they knew what was coming, and the boy in the photo didn't. The child had been on vacation with his parents, Kang Ko and Jin Lee Seon, who were just beginning to share the joys of travel with their son. The 3 had spent days exploring Thailand together, laughing, eating street food, and taking pictures, unaware that their return flight would end in catastrophe. When the plane went down, all 3 died together. What was supposed to be a family's happy memory turned into a nation's nightmare. As investigators combed through the wreckage, early reports suggested a devastating combination of a bird strike and poor weather conditions. The control tower had reportedly warned the crew about the risk, but the decision to land was made anyway. And now, families are left with ashes and silence. The crash site at Muan became a place of unbearable grief. Outside the airport, heartbroken loved ones camped for days, desperate for news, any word, any way to see or say goodbye to the ones they'd lost. Among the dead were 5 children under 10 years old. The youngest, that little boy in the window seat, became a symbol of all that was lost. His father, Kang Ko, had worked in the promotions department for the Kia Tigers baseball team. Friends, fans, and former colleagues flooded social media with their sorrow. Retired pitcher Kim Byung-hyun wrote, "I've been pressing like on pictures of my friend, his wife, and their 3-year-old son having a great time in Thailand. It gives me great pain." Sportscaster Jung Woo-young added, "He was great at his work, and the entire baseball broadcast team liked him. Me among them, of course. I want to pay condolences for him, his family, and the tigers. Those words, those photos, frozen forever in time, are all that remain of a family full of life just days earlier. And that single image of the boy by the window, unaware of what's coming, lingers in the minds of everyone who's seen it. A moment of innocence, captured before everything changed. A reminder of how quickly joy can turn to tragedy. Back in the Neolithic era, Earth wasn't exactly a walk in the park. Between hunting your dinner, avoiding becoming someone else's dinner, and surviving in a world with no Wi-Fi, things were rough. But as if nature's challenges weren't enough, humans decided to crank the pain up a notch with DIY brain surgery. Yep, we're talking about one of the oldest surgical practices ever discovered, trepanation, or, as I like to call it, extreme hole punching for humans. Let's zoom in on a site in France dating back to around 6500 BC, where archaeologists uncovered something that might look like a prehistoric crime scene. Dozens of skulls, 38 to be exact, with neat circular holes bored right through the bone. But don't cue the law and order sound just yet. These weren't casualties of some ancient battle royale or mass murder. What we're looking at here is early medical intervention. Sort of. These holes weren't caused by violence, at least not the usual kind. Instead, they were the result of a deliberate surgical procedure called trepanation. It's considered one of the first widespread forms of surgery performed by Homo sapiens. And just to be clear, no scalpels, no antiseptics, and absolutely no anesthesia. Just stone tools, shaky hands, and a whole lot of pain tolerance. Trepanation involved scraping or drilling a hole into the human skull, presumably while the patient was still very much alive. And although the idea of someone coming at your head with a sharpened flint tool sounds like a horror movie setup, the practice was surprisingly common. Across multiple archaeological sites, including the one in France, trepanation appears to have been all the rage. In fact, some studies suggest up to 10% of Neolithic people underwent the procedure. At the French site, a staggering 33%. That's 1 in 3 people walking around with a literal hole in their head. Now, you might be thinking, if it was so popular, maybe it worked. Well, not really. Evidence shows that less than 40% of those trepanned skulls had signs of healing, meaning over 60% of patients likely didn't make it. The top contenders for cause of death, infection, massive blood loss, or the surgeon just poking a little too deep into the old brain matter. And for those who did survive, recovery took months, with the risk of lifelong pain, neurological issues, or just being stuck with a permanent headache bigger than the one they were probably trying to cure. So why on earth did anyone agree to this? The reasons for trepanation were as diverse as they were speculative. Some think it was done to release evil spirits, ancient brain exorcism, anyone? While others suggest it was used to treat head injuries. Fairly common in a time when clubs and rocks were the primary dispute resolution tools. It may have also been used to ease epilepsy, migraines, or even psychological conditions. Basically, if your head hurt, someone's solution was to drill a hole in it and hope for the best. Honestly, if you were alive back then, the smartest move was probably to keep your headaches to yourself. Interestingly, people of all ages were trepanned. Kids, adults, the elderly, no one was safe. And while the tools were crude, think sharpened flint, bone scrapers, or even seashells, the results were sometimes surprisingly precise. It wasn't always a hack job. Some of these ancient surgeons knew what they were doing. Sort of. Even more surprising, trepanation never truly disappeared. While the modern version is vastly more refined and done only in specific medical cases, like relieving brain pressure, it's still performed today, only now with sterile equipment and an actual anesthesiologist instead of, say, a guy with a rock and good intentions. So the next time you think you're having a rough day, just remember, at least no one's trying to fix your headache by cracking open your skull with a seashell. Progress, baby. December 31st, 2017 was supposed to be just another over-the-top vlog day for Logan Paul. the bleach-blonde, energy drink-fueled YouTuber with a camera glued to his hand and a subscriber count that could fill a football stadium. Known for his wild antics, questionable pranks, and volume levels that rarely dropped below scream, Logan had taken his content circus to Japan, a trip he dubbed the Tokyo Adventures. And let's just say it did not end well. That day, Logan and his crew decided to visit Aokigahara Forest, also known as the Suicide Forest, a hauntingly beautiful patch of greenery near Mount Fuji with a tragic reputation. Now, most folks hear Suicide Forest and think, maybe let's not film there for views. But Logan, being Logan, probably saw it as the perfect setting for some spooky B-roll and maybe a few jump scares. Classic internet logic. So, off they went, decked out in neon green alien hats and nerves of steel, joking and laughing like they were on their way to an amusement park instead of one of the most somber places in Japan. They entered the forest, cracking jokes, giggling, and treating it like a haunted house walkthrough. But then, they stumbled upon something they weren't ready for, something very real. They found a body. A man who had tragically taken his own life hung from a tree just off the path. And in that moment, Logan Paul, eyes wide, camera rolling, made a decision that would haunt him for years. He kept filming. Not just filming, but zooming in, reacting, and even laughing nervously in a way that made the viewers everywhere collectively cringe so hard their souls left their bodies. When the video went live on YouTube, it exploded. Not in a, wow, great content kind of way, but in a, what the actual hell were you thinking, firestorm. The backlash was nuclear. Fans, fellow creators, celebrities, and even mental health organizations slammed him for turning such a sensitive moment into clickbait. The internet didn't just cancel Logan, they tried to launch him into the sun. YouTube pulled the video after it had already racked up millions of views, cut ties with Logan on multiple projects, and even removed him from their top-tier creator program for a guy whose entire brand was based on go big or go viral. This was the wrong kind of viral. Logan quickly posted an apology, actually several. There was a Twitter Notes app apology, a teary-eyed YouTube video titled So Sorry, and even a brief hiatus from vlogging. But the damage was done. His image was fried, grilled, and flambéed. Yet somehow, like a phoenix in overpriced merch, Logan made a comeback. He pivoted, rebranded, and eventually reinvented himself as a podcaster and boxer, because of course he did. From the forest to the fight ring, his journey has been one weird roller coaster. But that incident remains the darkest chapter in his highlight reel. It sparked global conversations about internet ethics, mental health awareness, and the responsibility that comes with having an audience of millions. The Suicide Forest video became a cautionary tale in the age of do it for the views. Today, Logan Paul's still around, still loud, still polarizing, but hopefully a little wiser. The Forest video deleted, but the memory still very much alive in the digital archives of what not to do on YouTube. And if there's a silver lining, it's this. People talked about mental health, about respect, about empathy. Maybe the internet learned something that day, between the gasps, the outrage, and the alien hats, because sometimes going viral isn't worth it, and some places aren't meant to be content. It was supposed to be the most unforgettable moment of their lives. In September 2019, Steven Weber, a 39-year-old social worker from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, had taken his girlfriend, Kanisha Antoine, on a dream vacation to Tanzania. They were staying at the Manta Resort, in a one-of-a-kind underwater cabin anchored about 250 meters from the shore of Pemba Island, an isolated paradise floating in the Indian Ocean. But what started as a romantic escape turned into a devastating tragedy that would haunt everyone who witnessed it. On the third day of their stay, Steven had planned something extraordinary. He wanted to propose underwater, outside the submerged cabin's window where Kanesha was relaxing inside. He slipped on a mask and fins and dove into the crystal-clear water, alone. In his hand, sealed inside a plastic bag, was a handwritten note. As he floated before the glass, Kanesha began filming. She had no idea this moment would be the last time she ever saw him alive. Stephen pressed the note against the window. The message read, "I can't hold my breath long enough to tell you everything I love about you, but everything I love more every day. Will you please be my wife?" He then flipped the note to reveal the proposal, reached into his shorts, and pulled out a ring. Smiling, full of love and anticipation, he began swimming upward. But something went wrong. Stephen never made it back to the surface. Kanisha waited, watching, perhaps confused at first. Seconds turned to minutes. Panic set in. Divers were called, staff scrambled, but by the time help arrived, it was too late. There was nothing anyone could do. The man who had just poured out his heart beneath the sea had vanished into its depths forever. The resort's CEO later said everyone was shaken to the core. The underwater room, normally a place of wonder, had become the backdrop to a heartbreak beyond comprehension. Kanisha later shared the video and her grief in a heartbreaking Facebook post, writing that Stephen never got to hear her answer. "There are no words adequate enough to honor the beautiful soul that is Stephen Weber Jr.," she penned on September 20th, 2019. "You never emerged from those depths, so you never got to hear my answer. Yes, yes, a million times, yes, I will marry you. We never got to embrace and celebrate the beginning of the rest of our lives together, as the best day of our lives turned into the worst, in the cruelest twist of fate imaginable. The cruelest irony? Their happiest moment had become their last." The Manta Resort released a somber statement, shaken by the tragedy. The U.S. Department of State confirmed the death, offering condolences, but no words could mend what had been broken. Imagine the agony of watching the love of your life disappear before your eyes. The ring still gleaming in the sunlight, the note still pressed against the glass, the future they planned now swallowed by the sea. Some love stories are cut short, some goodbyes come without warning, and some moments, meant to be the start of everything, become the end. This was supposed to be their happy ending. Instead, it's a haunting reminder of how fragile life and love can be. We're heading to the Atacama Desert, one of the driest places on Earth, where, ironically, one unlucky soul managed to pull off the impossible: death by drowning. Yeah, in the desert. If that doesn't scream zero chill, I don't know what does. So, let's rewind about 5,500 years. It's the Neolithic era. You're a coastal guy living in what's now northern Chile. A place so dry it makes Death Valley look like a kiddie pool. But back then, much like now, the Atacama was brutal, blazing hot by day, freezing cold by night, and completely uninterested in your survival. Still, people made it work, especially near the coast, where seafood was plentiful and the ocean offered both dinner and danger. Enter our unfortunate protagonist, a man around 35 to 45 years old, buried in a round stone tomb on a bed of seashells. Sounds kinda peaceful, right? Maybe even elegant. But don't be fooled. This wasn't a spa burial. Scientists were puzzled. The guy had no obvious injuries, no spear wounds, no bear maulings, no Neolithic slips and falls. He just dropped dead, or so it seemed. Then came the microscopic bombshell: diatoms. What the heck are diatoms? Tiny algae that live in water. Not the seaweed on your leg kind. These are invisible to the eye, floaty ocean dwellers. And somehow, they were inside his bones, which, for the record, is not where diatoms belong. The only way they end up in your skeleton is if you inhale water so violently that your lungs burst. Water floods your bloodstream, and those tiny algae hitch a ride all the way into your marrow. Yeah, it's as bad as it sounds. In short, homeboy drowned. In one of the driest places on Earth. While living near the coast, sure, but still, the irony is thick. Now, this guy wasn't exactly thriving before the ocean claimed him. His skeleton showed advanced arthritis. His legs were worn down, probably from years of squatting to gather shells. His arms and shoulders were overdeveloped in the worst way. Clearly, the result of non-stop rowing, swimming, and chucking harpoons at fish. Basically, he was a prehistoric gym rat who never skipped leg day. But it came at a price. To make matters worse, he was also severely iron deficient. And why? Tapeworms? Giant, gnarly parasites likely picked up from eating fish that were about as cooked as your average sushi roll. So, let's tally this up. Back pain, busted knees, worm-infested guts, and a final breath that involved inhaling the Pacific. Oof, but wait, it gets weirder. He wasn't alone. Buried beside him were 3 others, another adult male, a woman, and an infant. All 4 dated to the exact same time. So, naturally, people started thinking disaster scenario. Earthquake plus tsunami equals prehistoric wipeout. Makes sense, right? Well, not quite. The other 3 skeletons, no diatoms, not even a trace, which means they did not drown. So much for the tsunami theory. The current thinking is this. Our guy drowned, maybe while diving for shellfish. The others? They died around the same time, maybe even the same day, but from something else entirely. Dehydration, exposure, illness, or maybe just life being the worst. So, to wrap it up, one overworked fisherman with a tapeworm and crumbling joints drowns in the ocean, in the middle of the driest desert on Earth, while 3 companions drop dead nearby from unrelated causes. It's basically a 5,000-year-old group project from hell, and one mystery no one's figured out yet. And next time you're at the beach thinking, I could totally live here. Remember, this guy probably thought the same thing, until the ocean quite literally dragged him under. September 4th, 2006 started out like just another wild adventure for Steve Irwin, the larger-than-life, khaki-wearing, croc-wrangling Aussie legend known to the world as the Crocodile Hunter. The guy had more energy than a double-shot espresso and a passion for wildlife so contagious, even snakes seemed to smile at him. That day, Steve was off the coast of Queensland, Australia, filming a new documentary called Ocean's Deadliest. Sounds intense, classic Steve. They were out in the Great Barrier Reef, which, let's be honest, is basically nature's version of Times Square, full of creatures, colors, and the occasional toothy guest star. Steve and his crew were hoping to find a tiger shark to film, but Mother Nature was clearly on a coffee break, and the shark was a no-show. So they pivoted. Enter the stingray, a chill, pancake-shaped sea creature just vibing on the ocean floor. The plan? Get footage of Steve gracefully swimming alongside it. No drama, just Man and Ray sharing the spotlight. But as fate would have it, the day took a tragic turn. While snorkeling in shallow waters, Steve got a little too close. Stingrays are usually pretty laid back, but like anyone woken from a nap, they can freak out if startled. According to Justin Lyons, the cameraman, this particular stingray got spooked and jabbed Steve in the chest with its barb. Sharp, nearly 10 inches long. It struck him right in the heart. At first, no one realized how serious it was, but then blood filled the water and panic hit. The crew scrambled to pull Steve onto their boat. He was conscious for a moment, but it was clear this was bad. They performed CPR like mad while racing back to land, praying for a miracle, but it wasn't enough. Steve Irwin died that day at just 44 years old. The news hit like a sucker punch to the world's collective gut. How could Steve Irwin, the man who literally put crocodile wrestling on our weekend watch list, be taken out by a stingray, an animal that most people associated with peaceful aquariums and relaxing snorkel trips? The world mourned. His family, wife Terry and kids Bindi and Robert, were devastated. Terry later shared how Steve often talked about the fragility of life, not in a gloomy way, but his motivation to live every second to the fullest. And man, did he ever. He packed more adventure into his years than most people could manage in 5 lifetimes. The Australian government offered a state funeral, but the Irwin family chose a private farewell. Meanwhile, fans flooded the Australia Zoo, Steve's home turf, leaving flowers, letters, and enough khaki-colored gear to outfit a small army. The zoo, still run by Terry, Bindi, and Robert, remains a hub for wildlife education and conservation, exactly what Steve would have wanted. And Steve's legacy, it's still kicking. His Wildlife Warriors Foundation continues fighting the good fight for endangered species. Bindi has become a conservationist and TV personality in her own right, and Robert's following in Dad's footsteps. charming animals and audiences alike with his Irwin genes and goofy enthusiasm. Even science gave Steve a nod when a tree snail was named Crikey Steverweenie in 2009, and Hollywood finally got the memo in 2017 with a posthumous star on the Walk of Fame. Though he's been gone nearly 2 decades, Steve Irwin's spirit is still out there, swinging from trees, wrestling gators and whispering "Crikey" every time someone dares to care about the wild world. On December 4th, 2012, in the heart of New York City, 57-year-old Kisuk Han lost his life in a moment so sudden and horrifying it would grip the nation and spark outrage around the world. He left the house that morning after a fight with his wife. Maybe it was just a moment of anger, or maybe he just needed some air. He didn't answer her calls after that. She kept trying, but he never came home. Later that day, on a crowded subway platform in Manhattan, Kisuk Han was shoved onto the tracks by a stranger during a brief and terrifying confrontation. Seconds later, as the roar of the Q train grew louder in the tunnel, a freelance photographer raised his camera and snapped a photo, capturing Han clinging to the edge of the platform, turning his head toward the oncoming train. The next morning, that image was on the front page of the New York Post. One word stamped over it in all caps: doomed. That photo, so stark, so brutal, sparked a nationwide firestorm, not just because of what it showed, but because of what it didn't. It didn't show someone reaching for Han's hand. It didn't show a frantic effort to pull him up. It showed isolation, helplessness, a man at the edge of life, moments from death, and a camera flash as the only answer. The man behind the lens, Umar Abbasi, later defended himself. He said there wasn't enough time, that Han was too far, that he was running toward him, firing his camera's flash to warn the train operator, that the man who pushed Han even turned toward him, and for a moment Abbasi feared he'd be the next one on the tracks. The time between the shove and the impact, maybe 22 seconds, maybe less. He took 49 photos in that time. Still, people demanded to know, could he have tried harder? Should he have dropped the camera? The debate raged. News anchors, journalists, even veteran photojournalists weighed in. Some gave Abbasi the benefit of the doubt. Most, though, reserved their outrage for the Post, for splashing such a horrific image across their front page, for turning a man's final moment into a headline. But what haunts people more than the ethics of the photo is what it says, not just about the photographer or the paper, but about us, about the way we consume tragedy, about who gets remembered with dignity and who becomes a spectacle. Kisuk Han was a Korean immigrant, a father, and a husband. But to many, in that moment, he was just the man in the photo. And for his wife and daughter, forced to see that picture repeated on TV, online, and social media scrolls, his death didn't end with the train. It played out again and again, frozen in time, impossible to escape. There's a chilling truth beneath the outrage. Some lives are allowed to pass quietly, others are put on display. When disasters strike places like Japan, media often focus on survivors, the strength, the rebuilding. But in places like Haiti or with people like Kisuk Han, the camera doesn't always look away. It lingers, it shows pain, it shows death, and somehow that's allowed. So ask yourself, when you saw the photo, did you look away or did you look closer? Because the image that claimed to inform the public may have done something else entirely. It reminded us that in the eyes of the media, not all lives are equal. And for Han, whose life ended on a subway track, what remains is a moment he never chose to share, one we will never forget.